Thank you. And again, thanks for your patience and willingness to speak with me. The cancer journey is full of bumps and crazy turns, and and then when you become an advocate, yeah, things kind of like the Man Up to Cancer movement has kind of been taken off, and just kept me like super busy. So I appreciate it.
No, that means a lot, man. I'm so thrilled to have you. So thrilled to talk about you and your story. And I really want to, first of all, I want to go back in time, Trevor. I want to go
Yeah.
back in time to, what was life like? Yeah, that's how it is, man.
Yeah.
What was life like before cancer?
Life was great. Like I was 41 years old. My wife and I live here in Maine on the Atlantic Ocean, basically, about a couple hours north of Boston, and been here most of my life. And we have two daughters. So Sage and Elsie, they were 12 and 10 at the time of my diagnosis, and everything was just trucking along. I was before cancer, I was a pretty healthy guy, like very active. Um, you know, just enjoyed all the outdoors. Living here in Maine is a great place for the outdoors. And I was a journalist for many years. And then at the time of my diagnosis, I was doing my own public relations consulting, just like a one man company. And my wife was a teacher, and the girls were just going through school. And, it was like prime of life. So, yeah, it was good.
Yeah, that's fascinating, right? Because you're on a kind of trajectory through life. Things are going your way,
Oh,
and then
yeah.
it just hits you. Like, so tell me the moment. Like, how did you find out?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, you're right. Like you're just kind of going along and you have all these like illusions in your head. Like you tell these stories to yourself, like, I'm going to live till I'm 80 and I'm going to see my grandkids. Like, like you just have this imagination of like what the steps are. And then cancer comes along, and sometimes I use the phrase life asteroid, because it's like an asteroid has hit you and your family. And it's like, oh my God, I went from a 41-year-old, middle of life, dad and husband and worker, to quote unquote a cancer patient, facing metastatic colorectal cancer at age 41 with young children. And boom, life asteroid, right? Yeah.
That's a beautiful way of putting it. Because yeah, exactly, it is like an asteroid that just blows up into your world.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
what was the biggest change for you, Trevor?
I mean, I think at first it was just real like physiological shock. And people don't talk about that enough. Like the shock to your system when all of those, like, it's like you're in the matrix, and then one day you realize like, oh my gosh, like I might, this might kill me, like, and soon, like. So there's the shock, and then there's the I went into a period of deep um mental health struggle. So I think the biggest change was like, I'd always been a pretty positive person, outward person. I struggled, before cancer a little bit with like typical depression, anxiety, like so many others do. But when cancer hit, and the idea of possibly dying at a young age and leaving my kids behind and my wife behind, it just crushed me emotionally. And so I went into a pit of despair, man, like clinical anxiety, depression, the whole works. Like I was on the floor. Well, there was a lot of days when I just wasn't even functioning. It was that bad. I thought I was going to have to go into the hospital for my mental health, not even my cancer. Right. So I think, and that for the first, I'm thinking like 6 to 8 months of my journey, it was like a pit, and it was crushing. It was just emotional turmoil.
And I'm so glad that you brought this up, man, because it's something that does not get talked about enough.
Oh, yeah. Mental health with cancer. My God. Like I've gone through 5 major surgeries, more than 50 rounds of chemo and immunotherapy, all this stuff, like countless blood draws, the whole physical stuff. And none of that, all of that is minor compared to the emotional challenge that I've faced as being a relatively young dad and father going through cancer. Like, and you're right. And that's one of the reasons why Man Up to Cancer exists, and why I am a patient advocate, is that mental health and those challenges are not talked about nearly enough, and especially among men.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just, I know it's just such, it goes straight to the core of your identity as a man,
Oh,
as a father, right? And it just throws everything up. So tell me, like, we're going to talk about Man Up to Cancer. We're going
so
to talk
well
about,
said. Yeah.
thanks, man. We're going to talk about man, but I want to know, like, you went into that pit because I know what it's like, man. You
Yeah.
stand on the edge, right? You look down into the abyss. What was it like, and what's helped you to
So
as
well,
well?
it was like hell. It was like literally being in hell. But here's what helped: love, uh, my family. Like I am for a guy who got stage 4 cancer at 41. I'm honestly the luckiest guy in the world because I have a wife and 2 daughters who just loved me through it. Like I wanted to go away. I didn't want to be a burden to them anymore. I'm like, I'm leaving. I'm going into the woods. I can't. Like I was just like you said, my identity was just destroyed. And yeah, I just wanted to protect them. I didn't want to be a burden anymore. So I'm like, I'm leaving, and they're like, hell, you are. Uh, my my wife really was, they all gave me that, like that love, and my wife gave me that tough love of being like, hey, you need to get help. Like, I don't care if you live another year or another 40, like we need you to be back engaged with us. We need you. You can't just check out. And that was tough to hear, but it was what I needed to hear. And that's really when I got over the first barrier, which is usually the barrier for men when they're facing this type of life asteroid, which is accepting help, accepting that you can't do it on your own. Like I reached that point where I realized like my anxiety, my depression, the cancer stuff, I could not do it on my own. And that's the point, probably about 6 months in, when I really started reaching out for the supports that I needed to get out of that pit. Because that pit is huge, man. And like I know that people try to climb out of there on their own, but it usually doesn't happen.
I know, man, and that's one of the things that I certainly regret not doing. Going through cancer is not getting that help. I'm not getting it early enough because it's like it's cancer. It's like supposed to be tough.
Well, right, but we're taught not to need help. Like most of us are raised kind of as men to that rugged individualism. Like, you know what, I can handle this. I can handle my business. I got this. But I was, and in some things in life that's not bad, right? Like home projects, etc. But I'll say like with cancer, cancer just crushed me in a way that no other challenge had. And that's when I started getting, so I reached out for counseling. I went to group counseling, individual counseling. I started meeting people online who were going through the same challenges I was with the same cancer type, kids with cancer. Like, that's where I found kind of the magic of that patient to patient movement and learning. And like, cause I was totally isolated. And then through online social media and through these, my counseling, which is here locally, um, I wasn't isolated anymore. And that's when I started to be able to climb out of the pit.
Yeah, yeah, you're so vital, Trevor. And you talk about counseling. I think one of the things that scares people away, I know it certainly scared me, whether counseling or working with a
Yeah.
psychologist, is because you
Yeah.
don't know what to expect. So, can you talk a little bit about like what's that like?
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, fortunately for me, I actually had a background. Like I had gone to counseling prior to cancer for just life and anxiety and relationships with my family. So I kind of had a sense of what it was going to be like. Um, but yeah, you're right. A lot of the guys in my group have that resistance or hesitance to talk about it. And you know what? And I'll say like, if that's not your thing, fine. Like there's plenty of tools in the toolbox. Counseling is just one of them. I mean, there's fitness, there's exercise, there's nutrition, there's meditation, there's all kinds of tools that you can use, and the online communities, right? So there's all kinds of tools that you can use to avoid isolation. Counseling just happened to be one that really, really worked for me. And honestly, like yeah, you just go in there and you're the one doing the work. Like you're the one like sorting through the counselor's job is to just like absorb it and like maybe give you prompts, maybe give you some ideas, some homework, like just to like move the process along. But you're the one sitting down in that judgment free space, just being able to say all the stuff. Like, so for me, like, I didn't want to sit here at night and like talk to my spouse, or my close friends about like the real shit that I was feeling about cancer, right? But I could go to this person who's a total neutral party and say the things that I was terrified to say, like, I feel like I'm gonna die. You know, my will to live is pretty low right now. Like that stuff that is like really vulnerable, that's where I would do it, is there. And I felt like to get that out of, sometimes even just getting that out, getting those emotions out and just being able to process them in a safe place. No, that's like a trigger word for some people, the safe place to do it, but it is. I mean, counseling for me, it was that kind of, and still is, that place where, and sometimes I didn't even know what I was going to say, right? Like I get to counseling, I'm like, this is stupid. I don't know what to talk about. I don't have anything to talk about. I'm done. And like then 5 minutes later, I'd be like summoning up my like deepest fears and anxieties and stuff and like working through it. So yeah, I mean, it's not for everyone, but it's a tool.
Yeah, and I love that you bring up the fact that you're in essence you're in control. It's not like somebody does something to you,
Oh,
right?
yes, totally.
You
Yeah,
like
you're in the
you're
driver's
driving.
seat. You're in the driver's seat. You get to control, all the work, all the conversations. So yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, right. It's not like they make you do stuff. And it's true that like you discover things about yourself because sometimes you say things out loud that you go, oh my God, did I is that really how I feel? And yeah, it is, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a lot of guys who think, oh, I'm not like a sissy. I'm not going to go to counseling, and they'll take away my man card. And like my whole message is like, keep your toughness. Like you're going to need every bit of your toughness to go through cancer, but you're probably also going to need to open up a little bit. You're going to need to like grow that heart muscle, right? Like, it takes courage to accept help, right? And so that's what I'm trying to do, is say, whether it's counseling, whether it's meditating, whether it's music, like there's some badass guys out there going through cancer who also, do music therapy or paint or like have kittens that they like take care of to help them through this shit. It's like, so it's kind of like a new definition of masculinity, is really to like, you can keep those traditionally masculine values, like, strength and assertiveness and leadership, but you can also just incorporate in some of the more heartfelt stuff too, that, and the more vulnerable stuff. That doesn't make you weaker. It makes you stronger, because you're doing those things to be healthy, to be there for your family, to be there for your community, right? So like you're using the tools to like, and to help your survival. People who isolate going through cancer have lower survival rates. This is a fact. There's plenty of research to back it up. So that's a big part of my message, is like, you can't stay in your man cave. It's not good for you, man.
Yeah, so powerful, man, and so true that it's not just about you, right? Like for me, taking that on was huge, right? Because you feel like, oh, it's yeah, it's about my wife, it's about my son, it's about being there for them and being a normal person, and so that I'm not gonna just go away and lock myself into my own world.
Yeah, 100%, man. Spot on.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, and I love how you bring up the importance of connecting with people online, maybe
Oh,
sometimes in person. I mean, today, obviously, online world works well.
yeah,
So
man.
tell me about how that works and how vital isn't
Oh
it
my
to
God.
have a
So,
community?
yeah, thank you for that question. This is like, you get me going on all my passion topics here, right? So I was a total social media skeptic prior to cancer. Like I didn't use the platforms very much. Like most of people my age, like I had a Facebook account, but I didn't really use it for anything. I'd post a couple photos here and there. I just thought it was like political garbage and like people judging each other and like fake bullcrap. So I was like, whatever. And then cancer hit. And look, I was 41. I was facing a stage 4 colorectal cancer diagnosis with young children. Like in my small town here in Maine, like I couldn't just go like hang out with a bunch of people in that same, but I really needed to connect with people who were facing a similar challenge, like down to the level of like we're walking the same path basically. But I couldn't do it right here in my hometown. Like, and I'm like, it's online where you can find these people. So I'm going to give the example of Town. So Town is a network or a collection of, like, they call them neighborhoods on Facebook. It's private. It is run by and populated by colorectal cancer patients, survivors, and caregivers. Like, that's the community. And you in Town, you can drill down, like, specifically, like, I'm in these neighborhoods for people with my specific biology of cancer. I'm in a neighborhood for people with young children, people who have CRC with young children. So, and like all these different groups from what I needed. And then there's like the downtown area, which is everyone. And so Town opened my eyes, and I met, dozens. You can meet people from across the country and across the world who are walking that path with you, and that is just, number one, that is just priceless in and of itself. But then here's the real crazy thing. Number two, a place like Town isn't just like a support group. It's not just like, oh, I'm here for you. Yeah, I'm here for you too. That's great. But it's honestly like a think tank. It is where I have learned so much about my disease, because they have people who have CRC are engaged, who are scientists and medical backgrounds, and they bring in doctors to do webinars and like do presentations, and like it is about empowering yourself to know about your disease. Because I thought naively when I got diagnosed that I was going to learn about my disease and my options and everything else from my providers. As it turns out, the providers are generally too overwhelmed. They are, they don't have the time and capacity. They're serving hundreds of patients, right? So it's not malicious. They just don't have the capacity to spend that extra time with you on your disease and like go search all around. But if you go into a place like Town, which for me with colon cancer, right, I learned it's that patient to patient education. I learned about my treatment options. People were like, oh, they don't have this option for you where you are, but maybe they have it over down there at Moffitt in Florida, or at Fred Hutch in Seattle, or MD Anderson in Texas. So all of a sudden you start getting exposed to like the latest and greatest options in the field. And you start, it's just like a little like online laboratory. So you get the best of both worlds. You get the exposure to the camaraderie and knowing you're not alone, because there's people on there, in their 30s, 40s, like raising kids, being diagnosed with this. And then you also get the learning piece of it, which gives you the best chance at survival, right? Like I said, if you're not out there connecting and learning from these other patients and hearing what is out there, you're not giving yourself your best chance at extending your life and possibly even saving your life. I know many people whose lives literally have been saved because of information they got in online groups.
Absolutely, because that's where you get to find out about clinical trials. That's where you get to
Yes.
find out about so many other things. I'm so grateful that you are bringing this up, man, because it's also a place where it helps you to get, I think, help with your mental health. Because for me, I was going through testicular cancer, and
Yeah.
finding out about, talking to people about, addressing some of those fears that I had about what life would be like, after chemo and after surgery and after this, and hearing that it's a real thing that helped me to go, oh, you know what? Like, I can kind of see that there is a path to survive. There's a path to live, man.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the power of community. And again, like, social media and the internet have opened up that whole new world. It's only recently that we've had the ability to do this. So I can't say enough about the patient to patient movement and what that means. Again, like, doctors, they can't be expected to know everything all the time. And a lot of them are just drinking from the fire hose of information, trying to, it's tough. They have a tough job. And, in the past, there was kind of this paternalistic model of healthcare, right? It's like, you go to your doctor, they tell you what to do, they know everything. But the problem is, especially like at the community level in rural places, like a lot of these oncologists are maybe they're treating like all types of cancer, right? They're not specialists in your type, right? So yeah, so it's just I could get going down that rabbit hole all night, but I guess the point is, patients have the ability to learn. It's the same thing like if you were building a house and you hired an architect. you know, that architect is going to be the quarterback of, figuring out what your house should look like. But you can read tons of books about architecture. You can learn about it. You can get empowered so that you're a partner in that, so that you and your architect can have discussions like, you know what, maybe this and maybe that. And so this idea of the empowered patient, the old model being that kind of like they just told you what to do. Now, and I'm not talking about patients who just go on Google for a day and come up with some crazy ideas, right? I'm talking about like real learning, and then taking that to your oncologist and saying like, hey, we were talking about this in Colon Town, this new clinical trial or this new drug, like, what do you think? And most oncologists that are worth a salt will say, yeah, let's take a look at it, like, let's talk about it. If your oncologist doesn't want you to be part of your own care, like doesn't want you to be part of saving your own life, you need to fire your oncologist.
I'm so glad that you bring this up. Yeah, if you don't feel like that person is clicking with you, whether that's your oncologist or any other specialist, move on, bring
Yeah,
in somebody else, man.
it's your life. It's your life on the line, and no one, even the best oncologist, they're not going to care as much about your life as you do. Like, you have a role to play, and I don't care what background you're from. With the resources available and with all these other smart patients out there, you don't need to learn it all yourself. You just need to find the right smart patients to help you.
Exactly. And no one is more invested in your well-being, your way of life than you are yourself. Hey man,
Spot on.
let's talk about let's talk about us guys, because we spoke about men, and we're gonna talk about men up to cancer. And
Yeah.
you've spoken with so many men. Trevor, what is it that makes us different? Do we have different needs? How does it work, man?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, we're talking like thousands of years of biology and thousands of years of sociology, like culture, and those things intertwine. There are, science shows us now that there are, in general, we got to put the asterisk there, in general, that the sexes respond differently to a cancer diagnosis and to a life threatening illness. And it's one of the most prominent gender disparities there is, and there's tons of research on this. In all the leading journals, it's been there, and it shows that when facing a life-threatening illness, men in general tend to isolate, tend to withdraw from activities and people that they enjoyed, tend to have higher mental health problems such as anxiety and depression, and there's consequences to that, which we've already discussed. But the reason, the main thrust of why this is that we are brought up in most cultures, men are brought up to feel like they're supposed to fix it. They're supposed to be the fixers. You're supposed to be the problem solvers, and then you're confronted with this massive health challenge that you're not prepared or equipped to face. And so, there's that shame word that comes up again. Like, men feel this shame about getting cancer in the first place, and then like somehow it's a failure, and then we tend to check out. And women in general are much more comfortable accessing their social networks. They usually have bigger social networks to start with. I remember a study that showed like most American men don't even have a single close friend that they would confide their deepest feelings to, not one, whereas women generally have at least 3 to 4. Most times for the man, it's the partner or the spouse, which is interesting, right? So yeah, I think it's the way that we're somewhat wired from the past, but also just conditioned in the present, is to have this sense of mastery over our domains. And when the life asteroid hits, all of a sudden that mastery feels lost. And like, I can easily feel lost. I did it. I felt lost, and I think a lot of men do. I mean, I talk to so many men going through this, and that's definitely one of the common themes. Is that theme of feeling vulnerable, like an animal feels vulnerable when they're trapped. And sometimes that response is just go in the cave, or go away, like I did. Say, like, I'm just going into the woods. Like, I'm no help at this point.
But that's right. When you talk about the animal, yeah, the animals are part of the pack. right? They're not solitary. So that speaks,
Right.
yeah, that speaks to exactly what you're saying. You go back to your pack, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So tell me, how did this man up to cancer come up? How did it? What did compel you to bring people together?
Yeah. So as I reached out for help and got over that first hurdle of saying I can't do this by myself, I just it was there was such a glaring gender gap in the support spaces in cancer land. So here in Maine at my cancer center, it was always at least 75% women, 80% women to 20% men who were engaging with those services. And the services available are awesome. It's not just counseling, like it is massage and Reiki and nutrition and exercise classes, and all of it's free, right? This is the Dempsey Center, founded by the actor Patrick Dempsey. He makes all of this free to cancer patients and their families. You can go do all this stuff to support yourself, but very few men do. So that's the first place I noticed. And then secondly, like in Colon Town and other colorectal cancer spaces, colorectal cancer is, people don't know this, but it's about 50-50 men and women. Like I think it's maybe close to 55% men, 45% women who get it. Like people think it's an old man's disease. So it's definitely more close to 50-50 than people think. It's also a younger disease than people think. There's been a very an unsettling, concerning rise in young onset colorectal cancer. So there's all that going on too. So in those spaces, Colon Town, Fight CRC, Colorectal Cancer Alliance, again, I call it the 3-to-1 rule. Three women for every one man. So I just kept thinking, like, where are the men at? And so all that stuff we've been talking about, cultural conditioning and how men respond, everything, I didn't know that at the time. You kind of know it in your head because everyone knows the guy who's like, they have something hurting them for like 5 years and they won't go see the doctor because they like, I'm fine, right? That typical male, like we all know that from our stories. Like, I've done it too. Like I think a lot of men just have that resistance to even acknowledging that a problem might exist. So there's that 3-to-1 rule in cancer support spaces. And I'm like, I know that I'm not the only I know that I'm not the only guy out here struggling with the mental health challenge of cancer. Like, I know I'm not the only guy who could benefit from these supports. So, why aren't they accessing them? And that was really the question because I'm a journalist by training. That was my background. I did journalism for like 15 years. And that was like my curiosity, right? I was like, what is going on with the guys? And that was what led me down to just digging into the research and talking to guys and just tackling that problem, or learning about the problem first and then tackling it, but learning about the problem about isolation, why men do it, and then what we could possibly do about it. So that's really where it came from, is just seeing, I know that men are out there suffering with mental health, with physical pain, with all the stuff, and they're just being stubborn because of all the stuff that we just about, and they're not accessing the help that's out there. And a lot of this is that a lot of men they don't feel comfortable. I started to really understand what the problem was and what some of the reasons are behind it, because I knew that there was guys out there suffering just like I was, and I wanted to be able to do something about it. So that is really the genesis, is kind of seeing the problem of this gender gap in cancer land, and then thinking, well, I know these guys are out there. How do we reach them? How do we find them? Oh, and then the co-ed issue. So a lot of men feel uncomfortable or maybe ashamed, or just they don't love being in co-ed environments because they don't want to be perceived as weak. Like going on to if you go into Colon Town and you're sharing and you know that all these women are reading your posts, like you don't want to go in there and be like, I totally lost my mojo. Like I can't, I haven't been able to have sex, and like I cancer is ruining this and that. Like I think most men would say like that is not a comfortable space for them. So that's another reason why I was like, we need to meet men where they're at. And if we know that they're uncomfortable in that co-ed setting, maybe we just need to give them a place for them. There's there's spaces for women, and then there's spaces for men. And so that was really, I'm like, I'm going to create a community called Man Up to Cancer, and the we're going to do a Facebook group, and the group itself is going to be just for men, a place where male cancer patients, survivors, and male caregivers can just go and totally be themselves, not have to worry about that judgment or feeling uncomfortable around the opposite sex. And we're very inclusive. Like, it's a men's group, but if you identify as a man and your Facebook profile says you're a dude, then you're in, right? Like, it's not an anti-women thing at all. We love all the women in our lives. It's just that, men bonding with other men and having those rituals and that space has been since the dawn of mankind. And we've lost some of that recently. Like, some of those rituals have been taken away from us. We don't do as much of that anymore. So really, this is like the old lodge or fishing trip or hunting trip where guys like go out and shoot the shit, and just, it's a cancer group. Yes, like, we vent about our cancer. We talk about the challenges. But we come from all types of cancers. So we don't do treatment. We don't do sciencey stuff. Like, it's just about brotherhood, camaraderie, and knowing that, emotional support, and that we're going to have your back no matter what type of cancer you have, no matter your age, no matter what stage. So that's where it came from. So now Man to Cancer is the Howling Place group. We have about 2,000 men from I think every state in the US, most of the Canadian provinces. Canada is coming on strong in our group. We've got some Aussie brothers, Rob Miller and crew, down there in Australia. It's small numbers. It's early days yet, but like, to me, the numbers don't really matter. Like, yes, we're gonna grow, unfortunately, because there's men who could, benefit from what we do. But to me, we want to reach those people who need us. Like, I think about where I was at with my anxiety and depression and just isolated in 2018. Those are the people that I hope listen to my podcast or pick up, or hear this podcast and say, well, hey, what is that whole Man Up to Cancer thing all about? Because, we want quality of relationships. And when you come in, your family, like, when you're part of our group, you definitely are part of the Man Up to Cancer family. So we have the group. I do a podcast. I'm writing a book this fall. We have a website and social media, and we just had our first annual Gathering of Wolves, which is going to be, it is, well, we had our first, but going forward, it will be an annual retreat. We had about 60 men there, members of the group from all around the US and Canada. We even had a guy from Belgium come. Shout out to David DeWild. Yeah, and we just had it, and it was wow, it was a transcendent experience, I think, for most of the people, including myself. And we can't wait to get back there next year, for the Gathering of Wolves in 23. So it's really turned into, I thought I had a concept that would resonate with men out there, because there's not a lot of content specifically geared towards men in the cancer spaces. Like, I say there's two types of content in cancer spaces. One is like so positive that it's so unrealistic. Like, everyone's running 5Ks and raising money and everyone's smiling and like, oh, cancer seems like a freaking vacation. And then the second type of content is like soul crushingly somber. Like, oh, you have cancer. And it's like, we're so sorry. We're going to help you through this. It's like, I'm not dead. Like, I'm still here. So like, what I'm trying to do with like the public stuff around Man Up to Cancer is just kind of show the real deal. Like, we're going to show the highs and lows of cancer and everything in between, but it's going to be real, right?
Yeah, absolutely, man. And I just this you saw this profound need, and I'm just also want to speak to the fact that you saw the way to communicate, the way to so that people hear your message and they go, yeah, I can get behind that. That speaks to me.
Well, and that's because other guys, I just had this idea. I'm like, I'm going to do this cancer wolf pack. And I was like, this is going to go one of two ways. People are going to be like, that's freaking cool. Like, I want to be part of the wolf pack. Like, yeah. Or they're going to be like, this is the stupidest idea I have ever heard. Like, what is this wolf stuff? Like, who the hell is this guy? So that's why you need other role models and people to buy in. So shout out to my guy, Joe Bullock, follower number one, who has become the lead administrator in the Howling Place, which takes some pressure off me because then I can do all the other stuff like the fundraising and the podcast and everything else. But Joe bought in on the mission from day one. And I say, I put up the walls to the Howling Place, but he's pretty much filled the seats. Like that guy is like the cancer Oprah. He knows everybody.
Yeah, good on you, Trevor. That's I just love hearing that. And so tell me how, because it's just one thing led to another, and that's how things started growing, right?
Yeah, I mean, we put out the invite. Joe connected with all his people, and the two of us really just started saying, like, putting it out to the world, like, hey, we have this place, that's just for guys. If you're going through cancer, if you like our vibe, come check it out. And people ask me like, how hard was it to get men to open up in the group and like show you their real feelings, and, like, be vulnerable, and like, which happens on a daily basis, by the way, in the Howling Place. And it's not all like that. Like we have lots of lighthearted humor. We have an ongoing war about whether pineapple belongs on pizza. I'm a purist and I don't believe that it does, but I think I'm in
You're
the
wrong.
minority now. I know. See, I kind of figured that you would be a pro pineapple guy. Um, but people ask me like, so was it hard to get them to open up? And I'm like, well, once we gave them the space, it wasn't hard at all. Like guys were ready. Like it was almost like they were looking for a space to just come and howl and like go tribal and like and just put it all out there, say all the stuff. It's kind of like counseling, honestly, like just saying all the stuff that they're like, hey, like, and what is said in the Howling Place stays in the Howling Place, right? So people just felt like once they got permission, and then once they got role models, like we've got so many role models in the group that are just like guys, but like I said, like guys, but they also, will share about what they're going through. And once that people started to buy into that like role modeling, I mean, it was super easy. It is like you don't have to twist anyone's arms to really, once they're in there, they get it. And the people that don't want to do that, like that's fine too. Like we got people who don't share a lot. Like people just kind of keep it light and they're in there. I'll say the Howling Place is there for people on their terms. So men on their terms. You get out of it what you want from it. And it's there for you on your terms when you need it, how you need it, and if you need it. Like if someone comes into the Howling Place and they get something out of it, or maybe they can provide support to someone else for a little bit, and then they decide it's time to move on. I'm like, great, man. Like, not everyone wants to be around, you know, cancer guys and cancer content all the time. Like, I get that. It just happens to be my calling. Like that happens to be my purpose. And so yeah, now I'm going on a classic Trevor ramble. You get me going, Joe.
No, love hearing that, man. And that's what I want to talk to now, man, is that sense of purpose. How did that come up and how does that make you feel?
I just feel like it's just so aligned. Like I feel like everything that I had done in my life prior to just kind of like fell a little bit flat in terms of except for my family, right? Like being a husband, being a dad, like that was always like a core part of my identity. But with like my professional life, I was a journalist, I did PR, like I loved what I did, but there was always like a little bit of unfulfillment. But then all of the skills that I, collected over 40 years before cancer, I feel like it was kind of like they were all meant to come into what I'm doing now. Like I'm just manifesting this new mission, based on all the stuff that I was ready for. It was almost like the universe was like, okay, we're going to throw you this challenge because we know you're going to be able to do something here after you get out of that pit that's going to be special and help people. And, and so once I dug out of that pit with the help of so many people who loved me, it was like I was shot out of a cannon. Like I was just ready to go. I was like fired up, like, and it didn't happen overnight. Like there was a lot of healing that had to be done. And I still go through normal valleys. Like I still have anxiety and fears and depression and thoughts that are tough. But the difference now is I just don't dwell there, right? Like it's not clinical. It's normal. Like it's appropriate for what I'm going through. So I kind of just felt like when I saw the guy problem and I realized that I could be one of the people to help address it. Like, I'm like, that's a problem that I can help with. I know that I can be a bridge to guys because I feel like I'm a pretty, and I've been told like that I connect with people from different backgrounds. And I did that as a journalist. Like, I can kind of find our common ground no matter what backgrounds we come from. And finding that common ground, especially when you're going through cancer, just has given me the ability to make these relationships and bring people into the movement and inspire others. So it was almost as if a lot of the stuff that's happened, honestly, this is a big secret, Joe. I've been kind of winging it here. Uh, like there was no like I did have an idea of like what it could be or what it could look like, but I've also been in treatment this whole time or in surgeries this whole time. Like I'm coming up on 5 years since my diagnosis, and I have not had a stretch beyond, a couple of months of not having treatment or surgery. So there was that too, which turns out was a great thing because all of this man up to cancer stuff I had to develop at my own pace with the help of others and while I was facing stage 4 cancer. So a lot of it was just winging it. And then sometimes when you wing it and you just trust that you're doing the right thing, like I would just get up in the morning and be like, all right, I want to help guys going through cancer. Like, tell me what to do. And by the end of the day, I had done like 7 or 8 things that were aligned with that purpose. And so I don't want to say that it was totally unconscious because I, I definitely had some like part of it, but I almost feel like I was just put in the chute. And if I would just let it go and kind of go with it, that it would kind of take care of itself and the right people would come at the right time and find Man Up to Cancer and get involved. And dude, that's exactly what happened. Like I have so many people involved in Man Up to Cancer now and helping and leaders and like so it's not just me, it's not just Joe Bullock. Like it's a big group of us now, and like that gave me affirmation that the universe was that my trust in the universe was valid.
And that's what's inspiring, man, is the fact that you were winging it, right? It's like a plane, right? That's off course
Oh
most of
yeah,
the time, right?
totally. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because
no,
it
that's exactly right. Because and my counselor even told me that too. She's like, it's kind of like you're just building a boat while going down river. And the plane analogy works too. But like, but then I got to the point like I was so like obsessed with it and like doing it so much. She's like, okay, Trevor, like the boat is pretty much built. You might like make some refinements, but you've got a pretty nice boat and you have a bunch of people on the boat with you. So maybe you can go lay in the hammock for a couple minutes and like take turns, steering the damn thing. And I'm like, that's totally the Wolfpack mentality too. It's like when I was on chemo last year, 2021, I did hideous, what I call kitchen sink chemo. I was sick a ton and pretty much incapacitated a lot of that year. And Man Up to Cancer went along fine because it wasn't just me. And so that's the Wolfpack mentality is like you take turns breaking the trail. And then when you are not feeling well or you need a rest, then you let those others lead. And like I think that's the big transition for me now is to kind of see the big picture, but empower others to who get it, who like understand the message, who understand the purpose and the consequences, giving them the tools and just empowering them to say, hey, like go do what you want to do. Like go run with this again, because it's not my thing. It's not anyone's thing. It's all of us.
exactly. And the change that you speak to is what I love is that you after you got hit with cancer, it changes the way that you feel. Because how some people say, well, I won't let cancer define me. Well, I feel like, how can it not? Right? It is going to define
You don't
you.
have a choice.
You don't have a choice. It's here. It's going to define you, but you choose how it's going to define you, and you choose how that will direct your life from this moment on and living with purpose. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, and again, I just come back to love because I don't believe that an individual can make that transformation without others and without love and without, maybe they can. I don't know. Just for me, I wasn't able. I was transformed through the love of others, my friends, my family, my wolf pack, all of those people who have just loved me through this damn thing. And that has empowered me to let the transformation happen, right? Like to learn, to grow. Like I am a totally different person than I was before cancer. And in some ways, I feel like I'm a much better person. I feel like I'm more patient, more generous, more loving, more in tune with, you know, everything going on around me. And I wasn't there. Like the first year of cancer, if you had said, "Oh, but what about the silver linings, like the gifts of cancer?" I would have been like, "Okay, this is where I throat punch you." Um, and still, like, if I could trade it in, right? Like, if I could go back or not have cancer, you know, and not have to worry about my family and my kids. So my girls are 17 and 15 now. Remember, they were 12 and 10 when I was diagnosed. So to get here has been such a freaking gift. But if you were to say like you could be cancer free, like go without it, of course I would. I'm not going to lie to you and be like, no, the gifts of this are too good. Like I'd take it in a heartbeat. Hell yeah, take away the cancer. But I don't have that choice, right? Like we said, like cancer forces you to shed your skin and transform, and it's going to look like something. It's not going to look like it did before. Like yeah, the core parts of you are still there, but like even for the people who get a diagnosis, go through treatment, and then are NED and they're survivors, like years later, if they're being honest, most of those people will tell you like there was no going back to that person who was there before. Like it changes you, it changes everything. And with love, you can channel that into something that's super positive. And I'm living proof of that because I was broken.
So powerful that you bring it up to love, bring it back to love. That's what kind of completes the circle. That how it
Yeah.
all comes together, right? Is that sense of purpose, is that sense of giving, and that sense of belonging with other people, and the support that you need. It
Oh,
starts with love and ends there.
yeah. And people are like, oh, well, look at this. It's helping so many people. And I'm like, well, it's also helping me. Like I have more support now. Like this isn't just about altruism, right? Like, oh, I'm gonna go do this great thing. It's about helping others, but in doing so, I also help myself. Because if I'm having a scan coming up or something like that, something that's troubling me, I can go into my group and I know that I'm going to have so many, you know, brothers in there that are just going to just pile on me with love and like give me that fuel I need to just get over that hump. And so I've never been more supported. And that's so you know, the support spaces like this go both ways for the people who start them and run them and for the people, you know, who are in them.
Absolutely, man. And if someone wanted to find out more about Man Up to Cancer, what would they do?
The easiest thing to do is go to manuptocancer.com. That's like central hub. From manuptocancer.com, you can access the the social media, the Howling Place group, the podcast. Like there's all the pieces of it. So just manuptocancer.com. And that's kind of your central hub. If you're on Facebook, and you know what, someday maybe we'll have a different platform, but like Facebook was the easiest place to just start a community, right? And most of the communities are there. If you're on Facebook, just and you're a man and you're interested in checking out the Howling Place group, just just search for the Howling Place or Man Up to Cancer, the Howling Place, and it's a private group, so you need to put in a request to join. And we are very protective of our family, right? We're very protective of our group because there's so many scammers out there. It's crazy, right? Like people try to sell stuff and like there's bots and like everything else. So if you want to join, we're going to ask you to answer a couple questions, like tell us a little bit about your cancer. Just make sure you're a human, make sure you're not trying to sell us some magical cure, and then we'll get you in there. And then that's when the fun stuff begins.
You told me there isn't a magical cure.
Oh yeah, I know. Like it's the people all the time trying to sell us something, like some clinic somewhere or some route that I did a podcast once with my buddy Robbie Burridge, and we talked about the magic Himalayan beetroot, which doesn't actually exist, but I just created it as like I probably could go out and make like so much money selling it. Like, no, this is how you, because there's people out there, awful people who profit off of people's misery and desperation. Like a lot of us. So this is the tough part about Man Up to Cancer and the Howling Place is we lose our people, right? We've lost about 120 members have passed away since we started the group. So if you're going to be in with us, you have to be at that point where you really can look at your own mortality, and you can make relationships and face the mortality of your friends and your brothers, um, without looking away, without that destabilizing you. And again, I was not at that point early on in my cancer, so I would not have been a member of the Howling Place until later on, because it's hard. It's really hard to make these real friendships, support one another, and then lose your friends. But the benefit of knowing them and walking with them and the privilege of loving them, even until the end, so far outweighs for most of us the pain of losing them. It's painful to lose them, but it was more joyous and more rewarding to have known them at all. And so we talk about walking each other home, and that's part of what we do. If you're going to be in a cancer community, that is part of the deal. So you gotta be willing to face that, to address that, to really address it and clarify your own beliefs. And like, because when we're talking about cancer, and a lot of us are stage 4, we are talking about death and dying. And we live in a day and age where those are subjects that most people don't ever want to talk about. We don't talk about death. We don't talk about dying. We don't talk about sickness. Um, but guess what? Humans have been doing it for thousands of years, and we can do it too. And we can do it better. So that's a whole nother show, I think, Joe, is to talk about, facing death and dying, and not turning away from it. Because, it is hard, but again, the joy of being together and walking with each other on this road and supporting one another is, outside of my family, the greatest privilege I've ever had.
That's incredible. Trevor, thank you for being here, and thank you so much for what you do in the world, man.
Thank you. I didn't say at the top, man, but like, thank you for all that you do, for everything you do for the cancer community. We appreciate you, and I'm honored to be here and talking to you from around the world.